Joining me is William Kininmonth, who's former head of the National Climate Centre and at the Bureau of Meteorology. William Kininmonth, thank you so much for your time. So this UN committee says the reef is in bad shape. It's actually got record coral cover, and the Environment Minister doesn't correct it. But I want to talk to you about the other claim. This committee says that to save the reef, we should, among other things, cut our emissions even harder. All right. Australia cuts its emissions to absolute zero. How much difference would that make to the reef?
Good evening, Andrew. I believe it wouldn't make any difference at all. In fact, I have some doubts as to whether carbon dioxide has any influence on the global ocean temperatures at all. The main greenhouse gas is water vapour, and it's water vapour which keeps the Earth warm, and it's not carbon dioxide that has any significant impact.
And what do you base that on, William? I am interested to know what the counter-argument there is.
The United Nations talks about greenhouse gases as carbon dioxide and methane, nitrous oxide and so forth, but water vapour is around about 11 to 12,000 parts per million, whereas carbon dioxide is 400 parts per million, and methane is about 1.7 parts per million. So water vapour completely dominates the radiation processes in the atmosphere. It's emissions from radiation emission from the water vapour that keeps the surface warm, and it's the evaporation of water vapour over the oceans which stops the ocean temperature from rising too much. Our climate is modulated by water vapour, and yet water vapour is hardly spoken about in the greenhouse gas debate.
Well, that's in part because it's very, very hard to model in these climate models, these big mathematical estimations of how the climate works. It's not really taken into account in a big way in these models. Does your theory explain why the climate models that the UN and others have been relying on predicting this huge warming has in fact, almost all of them have in fact estimated more warming over the last, 30 years than we've actually got?
Well, that's true. As the IPCC in its last report sort of suggested, that the models are running hot, and they don't quite understand why. There's a real problem with the computer models, and they're saying, well, it's not running as hot as they believe, or the Earth's not getting as warm as they believe it should do, because the heat from the greenhouse gases is going into the ocean. And that's even repeated in the last report, State of the Environment report by the Bureau of Meteorology and CSIRO. But that, of course, is completely false. The oceans are, in fact, warmer than the atmosphere, and heat is going always from the oceans to the atmosphere. So you can't have the atmosphere warming the oceans. So there's a fundamental problem associated with the climate models and the whole theory.
Now, William Kininmonth, the global warming hysteria, though, is now running right through institutions. They don't tolerate debate and doubt like you've just expressed. Yesterday, for instance, a Queensland Land Court ruled against the new coal mine, claiming that experts agreed that the continued emissions of global warming gas is going to destroy the health and the life and the way of life of many human beings. It's going to cause or contribute to the widespread extinction of many animals. It's going to destroy the ecosystems on which human life depends, etc., etc. How much of that doom preaching, and remember, this is in a decision of a court, how much of it is true?
Very little, Andrew. I think we've got to look at the facts. And the fact is, yes, the Earth has warmed a little over the last 100 years or so, and particularly in the satellite period, we've been able to monitor the warming. What we see is that the most warming is, in fact, in the Arctic in wintertime. What this is resulting in is a longer period of ice melt, so we do get some of the glaciers and ice in the Arctic regions melting, but we also get longer growing seasons. You know, the spring thaw comes earlier, and the freezing of the rivers and so forth comes later, and therefore the growing season in parts of the northern hemisphere, up in say I was in Switzerland, where they're speaking about 2 weeks additional growing season over the 20th century. Now, this is obvious from the satellites that the NASA has put out, that the Earth is greening. So a warming, greening planet can't be all that bad. and certainly it's producing more foodstuff for people to, the starving people of the world to consume and make their life better. So this doom and gloom is not based on fact.
I find it amazing that the global warmers always say it's all bad, 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 bad. They can never isolate something that could be good. Nothing's all bad, nothing's all good. And that mere fact tells me they're not telling you the whole truth. William Kininmonth, thank you so much indeed for your time. Really appreciate it.